You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin Chleirigh.
And me, Paul Brophy. And today, Roisin, is episode 20, I
I
believe,
know.
of the County Councillor Roundtable Caucus, and we have a mix of new faces and very familiar faces as well. And speaking of our first familiar face, Roisin, we're delighted to be joined again by one of our we can call him co-presenters at this stage, Councillor Michael Sheehan, who's an independent councillor on Wexford County Council. Michael represents the New Ross local electoral area, and Michael has been a public representative since 1999. And Michael is also a former general election candidate and also former Cathaoirleach of Wexford County Council. So our three new faces joining us today, Roisin, and we have a nice spread across three different counties. So our first newcomer this evening is Councillor Paudie Dineen, who is an independent councillor on Cork City Council and was first elected in 2014. I beg your pardon, and he represents the Cork City South Central district. Before entering politics, Paudie had a 26-year career as a paramedic, and he also runs a local business as well, a local family pub for the last 42 years. And Paudie has been known in the county council as someone that likes to think outside the box and use different approaches to issues that affect the people of Cork City. And we're going to Clare next, Roisin, and we're delighted to be joined by Councillor Joe Garrihy, who's a Fine Gael councillor on Clare County Council, and he represents the Ennistymon local electoral area. Joe is a former chair of the West Clare Municipal District, and before entering politics, he would have been very, very heavily involved in his community and local enterprise sector in this Dunfermline, which is famous through a song through Christy Moore. And Joe was first elected in 2019. And last but by no means least, we're joined by Councillor Damien Ryan, who's a Fianna Fáil representative on Mayo County Council. Damien was first elected in 1999 and he's held his seat ever since. He represents the Ballinrobe local electoral area. He's the current chief whip on Mayo County Council for Fianna Fáil, and he's also the current chairman of the Local Authority Management Association. So, gentlemen, you're all very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thanks very much.
Paul, I'm always amazed at your memory because Paul rhymes all that off by memory. I mean, so I'm always amazed at your memory, Paul. There's no script, it's just memory.
Oh,
and before we move on, Councillor Michael Leahy, get mixed up between Michael Sheehan and Michael Leahy. Councillor John Leahy, who always joins us, he just phoned us and said that jet lag has just hit him after landing back from New York, where he was representing Ireland with the tricolour and representing his county as well for St. Patrick's Day over there with the politicians. So we said no worries at all. He can take a night off and well-deserved rest.
The Offaly flag is also the Ireland flag.
I didn't know that.
There you go.
So, gentlemen, you're all very, very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup's County Councillors Caucus, where we say the County Councillors, you are the forgotten powerhouse of the Irish political system. And so we'll kick it off with Councillor Michael Sheehan. Councillor Michael Sheehan, down there in New Ross, County Wexford, what is coming up in your county council? What motions are you bringing? What is happening in the county council? And most of all, what is the big issues with your local constituents down there?
Well, thanks, Roisin, and thanks, Paul, and it's great to have the other councillors on. And I was impressed by Paul's rattling off. And I said, he keeps describing me as former. I was like, oh, listen to former, will you listen to former? But anyway,
Okay.
We call it experience or we call it old fart. You can call it whatever you want, either way. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what? It's it's kind of that time of the month where it's just everything is now starting to ramp up. Obviously, with St. Patrick's Day in the middle of it, it throws the entire meeting calendar for a tizzy, and the fact that most of the elected representatives, of some shape or form, are going to be in some parade, mostly in the United States, but it could be in other places too. So, you know, we would have had, I was in Hartford, where we have a 30-year relationship with the Sister City program there. connected to the Dunbrody, believe it or not, and like they're going through the same situation. They have resurrected their twinning committee or their sister city committee, so they're hoping to come over here officially with the mayor and all the city officials. So there we go. We also had delegations in New York, so I'd say they were ahead of John there on the parade there somewhere on the route, and we always and we have a huge relationship with Savannah in Georgia, and if you can put it this way, the emigrant ship left the quays of New Ross on as the Dunbrody. The last destination the Dunbrody would have docked would have been Georgia, in Savannah in Georgia, in the 1850s. So we have a super strong relationship with the city of Savannah and the county of Wexford. So to give you, to give you the level of strength in it, normally, we send one official and one or two councillors out to New York or to Boston or to Hartford. We send the entire 5 municipal district chairs, the director, and 2 officials, and the tourism officials to go with it. So that'll tell you the level of seriousness. And this year, in addition to the officials, we also had the president and the provost of SETU, the Southeastern Technological University. So there's a huge tank of heavy hitters gone out there. And it's an intense. The Savannah one is intense. I mean, they start at 7 a.m. and like ask any of the lads, Damien will tell you, like when the Americans say we start at 7, it isn't 5 to 7, it isn't 5 past 7, it's bang on 7, you're gone. And they don't stop until about 11 o'clock at night. So between the jet lag and everything, you're all tired out. But very interesting, like, they're fighting the same issues as we are. They're fighting post-COVID, town centre vacancy. I mean, where we are in Hartford, to give you an example, Hartford was the insurance capital of the United States. And obviously, when COVID struck, everybody was working from home. And therefore, you didn't need all these buildings in the middle of town. You didn't need this corporate complex. You didn't need corporate offices. And they didn't reopen. So they were left with that. And then on top of that, the secondary service, like the shops, the pubs, the restaurants, they're all starting to close one after another because simply it's not there. So they're going through the same stuff as we are here, which I thought was very interesting. And, just like there, it's gone just like here, it's gone very expensive there. The cost of living is super high over there. And, you think, that over there will be far different from here, but it's not really actually in some ways. And that's out of it. But other than that, we same as John and the lads, we had a county council meeting in the middle of our trip. So we were kind of dropping in online. And one of the motions we had brought forward, and regrettably it was butchered in the chamber, but I wasn't there, so I can't tell you how it was butchered, but it was butchered. We're looking for the guidelines for solar farms to be issued by the minister urgently. I'm sure the lads will tell you the same as we are. We have 2 major solar farms coming down, applications gone in, huge protests about it, massive amount of numbers, and there are no national guidelines on the planning framework or where solar farms go and what the criteria are. And because there's no national framework, the planners just have to decide each one by its own merits. And the difficulty with that is one planner could decide one way, another planner could decide another. But the difficulty we have is that there is no national overarching framework to tell the planners in the local authorities, this is how the regulations must be administered for solar farms. So that was a bit of an argument within the chamber, and we'll see how it works out. So I'll have another motion coming back in April to kind of correct that and back it up and get it going there. But other than that, the URDF programs are open, the pride of place applications are open. So all of these large scale developments are now open for applications to come through. The deadline is, I understand the deadline is next week. So you won't get a ghost of a local government official next week because they'll be quickly trying to put all these plans and applications together. Once the deadline is gone, it's gone. There's nothing they can do. And there's a lot of smaller programs like the Pride of Place and those like community developments and community-led initiatives. They all too have a deadline on the 3rd of April, so they'll be coming around. But what has happened over the last 48 hours is the cost of living has literally shot up the political spectrum to be to the point where everyone is now just saying, how are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? What's going to happen? And, what is the government going to do? Good example, I drove down to County Hall the other morning, past the petrol pumps, 209. did all the work I had to do, went in, had a coffee, had a chat with some of the officials, came out 2 hours later, 216. And I was, Mother Divine God, it's going up 6 cents tonight, it's going up 6 cents tomorrow night. So, like, if something doesn't happen soon, by the middle of the week, we'll be at 250 a litre. And, I did an interview with Southeast Radio yesterday, and just to talk through all the steps about exactly what does this mean. And, if the government doesn't get ahead of this, we are going to be in for a serious, serious recession. And the problem we have this end, guys, is that we made it through COVID and we were racked up the debt. And then we went straight into the inflation driven crisis of the Ukrainian invasion. And those prices have not come down. The inflation rate hasn't come down sufficiently. It's down low now. But my worry is we're going into another cost of living crisis that's going to dwarf those two, with inflation on one side, interest rates going up on the other, and the actual lack of ability to fund our way out of it right around the whole thing. So it's a worry. And like people say, well, what do you mean? It's a worry all around. If you're on a variable mortgage, your interest rates are going to go up, and you're not going to have the money to make the payments because they're going to go up that quick. On top of your fuel crisis, on top of your agricultural crisis that will come behind it, and on top of the food prices that are going to go through, we're just going to find ourselves in a very tricky situation unless the government acts. So when we're talking to people like that, they get a grasp of it. They understand how serious an issue this is, and that, when they know the seriousness of it, they think, oh, but it's all over, it'll come down. Absolutely not. We're going to be in this for 3 to 4 years, because the damage that's been done over there now will make sure that the supply of energy and oil is going to be limited, and therefore the price is going to be high. And the suppliers, even the gougers, are passing it on to consumers. So all in all, I think we're in for a very, very worrying couple of weeks. Even if this conflict ends in a week or so, I think we're in for a couple of weeks of really rough economic turmoil. And then going into the summer and into the autumn, I think we're going to have a very tricky budget ahead. So on that happy note, other than that, we're all good, I guess.
I got to tune out now.
You talk about cost of living. I mentioned it on the last week's show. I was down in the supermarket, and the lady in front of me, I was minding my own business, and I just noticed that the lady said, "You know how you look? Okay, I'm next." I was on my phone and I looked up, and she said €99, and the lady just had a small little box, but a small box, and it came to €99, and I said, God, I must have missed my trolley, because I had a small box, a similar size box, and God, I hope mine doesn't come to €99. And I looked in to say, what did I have? And the customer said, can you just check that? And so she went, and the shop assistant said, every day, she says, I'm frightened to tell people. I can see how much their shopping's coming to. I see the shock on their faces. And this is the ladies in the supermarket, the cash register. They're talking about how they're seeing the shock on people's faces at the checkouts as well. So next on our screen is Councillor Paudie from Cork City. You're very, very welcome, Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Roisin, and hi to everyone. I guess with regard to what Michael said there, Michael, can I just say next, if you're ever in the rag, you might say hello to John for me.
I will.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm often in the rag. I remember going in, but I'm not sure about coming out. That part of me always lose.
Yeah. What's his partner's name? I can't remember his partner's name.
Mary.
That's it. Yeah, she's a hive of activity. Would you say hi to Mary and John for me? Paudie,
I will.
They know me well. Yeah.
Well done.
I suppose, unlike Michael, we're in the city, so in the city we come across a lot of different things again that would that affect the people more locally. And I'll just give you just a quick list, and then I'll go through each one. We have parking, WCs, housing maintenance, drugs, cost of living, as Michael mentioned, and immigration. While we don't have much about that, it's under the surface. And if something goes wrong with your representation or with the council, it comes up every time. So just to go, I suppose, with the list I have from the top there, parking. due to the government policy on parking and alternative transport needs, public transport, etc., we're putting in an awful lot of cycle lanes down here in Cork, taking out a lot of parking spaces, and it's creating a fierce problem for people who live on public streets in the residential areas. Huge, huge problem. Like so much so that a few weeks ago I've declared on the chamber that I will not be supporting any more Section 38 or Part 8s that do not include parking. No more. We can't take it anymore. We're under severe pressure for parking spaces. People coming home from work in the evening can't park. They have to park like 500 yards away. It's crazy stuff. WCs in the city, even though we have them, they're very few, and they're not even they don't be very much. They're not very much advertised or signposted, but it's a big problem we have down here in the public amenity in the parks. There's no WCs, and the council have no intention of putting them in, even though we keep fighting for that to be done. So that's a big issue on the ground locally. Housing, obviously, with the housing, my books are full of people trying to represent people to get them socially housed, and primarily they're all coming in on the back of notice of terminations. They have to vacate their rented accommodation that they've had for years, and they're in disarray. And we're trying to play catch up. It's very difficult. That's a big workload for me on my books. Housing maintenance requests. Again, issue, I guess maybe every council has this issue, but we've gone from having a workforce on the council to divvying out the work to independent contractors who have to bid, and they have to just bid and for the contracts and get work done, be it small, medium, or large. Even a plumbing job, like it goes out to a contractor to be done. And I think it's a big problem. Like it slows up the process of getting houses repaired. I have one property there, had a leak in the roof last October, still hasn't been fixed, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it just creates a bigger problem bigger job, more expense, and something we need to really get to grips with, I think, with councils is we have to get back on, we have to get our maintenance people back on the job and have them employed directly by the council to get out there and get these works done. Drugs, big problem around the area. It's the drugs, the selling and the using of drugs in the public spaces openly. I had an issue yesterday, not primarily locally in my area, but not where I live, of a big drug gang hanging around and a big fracas breaking out and residents running in fear. And just there's no. I don't want to be trotting down on the police. I know they have their hands full, but we could certainly be doing a lot more. And in that regard, with regard to drug-related offences and stuff like that. And I would primarily blame the judiciary really in this sense, because I think the Garrihy do a lot, but a lot of their work goes unnoticed and it goes unchallenged and is dismissed when it gets to court. And I think that really kind of, like, if you were working hard, you're working your butt off and getting no results, you stop working really, wouldn't you? You kind of give up somewhat. Not saying the girls do that, but in the mind they probably do. Cost of living, Michael is dead right about the cost of living. Big problem here in the city as well. Cost of living going up. Retail, hospitality, it's all down. They're closing, shops are closing. There's a shop closing or a business closing every day. And it's all jobs. It's all down to the cost of living. There's no disposable income in their pocket. There's no disposable income. The hospitality suffers, and jobs are lost. And I know, even though there might be 2 jobs, 3 jobs, but if that could be 30, 40 jobs every week, easily lost. And it primarily goes a bit unnoticed, unfortunately. But yeah, a big workload. Constantly fighting the council to get things done. I do get good results, and it's great when you get the results. To be fair, you do. You get a bit of a hey, thank God we got something done here. We need to win, and I suppose in respects to motions, my last motion to council was last Monday, actually, last Monday week, was regarding the reintroduction of the rail line from Cork City down to Geal, which is a seaside resort in East Cork. Now, the rail line currently only goes as far as Middleton, and while the old rail line is still there, and the infrastructure is there, and the stations are there, obviously need to be upgraded. The government have decided to put in a greenway instead of a rail line, and I put in a motion last month, a week to have a rail line installed alongside the greenway while we're putting in the greenway, and it would make more sense, and it would take 8 to 10,000 cars off the N25 coming into the city, which if I know if many of you have travelled it recently, which comes into a pinch point at the tunnel down to one lane. Imagine that. Everything goes into one lane, into a tunnel. So it's really, really problematic. And hopefully we'll get it onto the hopefully get a review of the audit and rail review and get it added in, and maybe eventually we get some funding to get that line back up and running again. So that's kind of where I am. Primarily local stuff I deal with. I stick to the local stuff, the local politics, and as I would say, I do get the wins, but there's also the losses. But there's also a lot of, as Paul said, common sense. There's no common sense when it comes to the funding of works. Or I think we do an awful lot better, and we could get more bang for our buck if we use a bit more common sense on the ground within the council itself, insofar as maintenance teams are concerned across the board.
Yeah.
That's it, really. Yeah.
And just on the housing maintenance issue, Paudie, have you noticed a difference in the size of the maintenance crew since when you were first elected in 2014, which is what, about 10, 12 years ago, to now, as regards the size? And obviously when you don't have the same level of people working, you know.
Yeah, we don't have the staff. We don't have the staff in that area. We have a maintenance department, but that's primarily run from an office inside the city hall itself. There's no teams. There's no workmen. You may have foremen in it. You'll have engineers, but there's no workmen. There's no. I think what we have for the whole city is 4 plumbers.
Oh, wow.
I think that's about it. Like, it's just not enough. And the rest then is sublet out then to private companies to get the work done, get the work covered.
Well, while you're talking about trains, could you also add in a train that comes from Cork to Kilkenny? My daughter lives in Waterford, and there is no train connection from Kilkenny to Waterford. So maybe you might do that one for me.
I'll try and get the one in East Cork first.
Kilkenny to Cork, nicely.
You said Waterford.
Oh, sorry, Kilkenny to Cork. Yeah, Cork. Sorry.
I'm sitting there thinking, doesn't the Waterford to Dublin train go through Kilkenny? I'm like, God damn.
I'm having a senior woman's moment there, menopausal moment, guys. Just ignore me. Yeah, to Cork. My daughter lives in Cork, and it's like down the motorway. It's years ago. I was looking at the map. 100 years ago, there was a better train infrastructure 100 years ago than what we have here now in 2026. Yeah. So that would be a good one there for you, Paudie. If you can do that, I'll tell you, I'll vote for you from Kilkenny. And next on our stream is Councillor Damien Ryan. Councillor Damien Ryan up there in Mayo. You're very, very welcome to the Irish.
Thanks very much.
So, Councillor Ryan, what is happening up in your area?
Well, I suppose to maybe start with some of the larger stuff, and you have mentioned trains. But just before I go on to that, I want to re-echo exactly what the other two councillors have said. And, something that's in short supply is common sense, and in oversupply is red tape and bureaucracy. And that's the challenge that we as public representatives have, to try and navigate our way around regulation, red tape, and at the same time to make sure that common sense prevails. And that is a challenge. But going back to I suppose trains, the big challenge we have is, and it's in the All-Ireland Rail Review, is the Western Rail Corridor connecting Athenry to Claremorris and subsequently onto Collooney, which in essence would connect by rail Sligo to the north and Galway to the south. And look, I think the emphasis and the participation of rail is growing steadily and grown at a formidable rate. And I would use the comparison that when the rail line was reopened from Limerick to Galway, At the same time, in tandem with that, the motorway was built, the M18, and a lot of the naysayers were very quick to say that it would be all cars on the road. You go from Limerick to Galway in an hour on the motorway, and there would be little or no participation on the trains. The experience now is they're looking for more service, they're looking for more rolling stock, they're extending the platforms because such is the participation. And it comes down to what Paudie has been on about, parking and the cost of parking and all of that. So, you know, for practical reasons, and particularly with the reduction in rail fares and the fact that the government did step in a number of years ago, the participation in public transport was never greater. And now with a cost of living crisis and with the price of oil going through the roof, well, look, I think that you're going to see far more participation in that regard. And, you know, we're pushing very, very hard here to get the section to Claremorris moving. There is a commitment that it will go to construction in the next 2 years, and it will probably take 2 more years to deliver that. But that's positive. But of course, the key thing then is that it continues on by running by Ireland West Airport and on to Sligo. And there is a debate going on in Sligo in relation to the Greenway, and I'm not at all against Greenways, but I don't think the Greenways should run on the line of critical infrastructure. I think we can do both, but we shouldn't be trying to replace one with the other. And the experience of Greenways are that, you know, the active travel schemes that we've put into our towns and villages, they're very, very popular. And, you know, the local residents use them day in, day out. And you see great participation on them, even in the dark winter's evenings. But, you know, if we overdo it with Greenways, the ones that are most successful are the ones that are in the picturesque areas, you know, along by the coast and all of that. So it's very important that we have a balance, but that we don't overdo that either. And I'm not at all against the development of greenways, but I do think that they need to be in scenic areas to maximise their impact. But going back to what we're at local level, well, look, the cost of the oil crisis is going to have a big impact on our roadworks programme this year. We're in the midst of preparing a roadworks programme, but that may well be shortened in kilometre terms because of the cost of bitumen and the cost of oil. That can have a big impact, and we're adopting a programme with that proviso and with that potential expectation. And I suppose the other thing then is housing. We have come to terms big time in the county. We are a rural county with 3 large urban towns, Castlebar, Westport and Ballina. We have come to terms with our housing programme. We're well on target. We've also been one of the first local authorities to amend the development plan, and the Section 28 that the Minister for Housing and Local Government looked for, we had that returned before the end of 2025. We brought in all our strategic reserve land, which was roughly about 500 acres around the towns and villages in the county. And that paves the way that at least is one obstacle taken out of the way. So the supply of land is not proven an issue. I know there's many other issues, costs and an awful lot more. It is complex. Housing is complex. But at the end of the day, it's important for us within the powers that's devolved to us. It's very important that we play our part. We make sure that the landscape is disposed towards that. And the last thing I would say on housing is, and I've said this at housing conferences, in dealing with dereliction, I think the local authorities sometimes go for the soft option of greenfield sites in delivering housing. They should be compelled to put a percentage of their derelict sites into their housing programme. Now, the Críocha grants in the towns and cities and right around the countryside as well is having a big impact where people are looking to buy dilapidated houses, avail of the Críocha grant and secure their first home. And that is proven a very popular scheme, and there's massive participation on it. But I do think that the local authorities shouldn't get away scot-free. I firmly believe that part of their housing programme, and they should be compelled to do so, should include derelict sites. Many local authorities have been criticised up and down the country for their lack of use of the CPO system, the compulsory purchase order system. And I think it's time that a directive comes from the department to compel them in the programmes that they prepare, that it be 10 or 15%. I wouldn't say any more than that, but I do believe that at least 15% of your housing programme should represent dereliction, because that's multi-purpose. It's dealing with your dereliction in your towns and villages, and it's also providing housing for the people that badly need it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Councillor Damien Ryan, for that. And last but not least, we're down to the county of the Shanakees, down there in County Clare. Councillor Joe Garrihy, you're very, very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup's Caucus Roundtable.
Thank you so much, Roisin. It's great to be with you all. And look, I won't go back over being last. Everybody else has used up an awful lot of the same issues, because as I think Michael said there at the very beginning, it's such a globalized world at the moment. You can travel across the globe and you will find similar issues and knock-on effects from. It's like the butterfly flapping its wings, and the effect is felt so far away. I think that's been exacerbated hugely in the last number of years. I became a councillor in 2019, and I feel like I'm moving from crisis to crisis. It was immediately dealing with COVID. Touching on what Paudie said there, my local electoral area is Ennistymon, and I live in between Listonvarna and Doolin, very high tourist area. The Ukrainian war and impacts from that, not just from the costs and everything else. We're consistently being the highest area where beds have been taken for people who came from Ukraine in the country, in our small area, up to 600 beds in the town that I live close by to, in Listonvarna. And there were an awful lot of say complexities around that. Our area was hugely welcoming, and I believe in that. I believe that the right thing was done to support people who were fleeing very difficult circumstances, and they were fantastic people. We had 1,500 people from Ukraine living in a small town, and I have to say, it has been going on now for over 4 years, and a lot of people have settled. It has been profound. The impact in the area, in a small local area, is true, and that situation varies from hugely positive to schools being full, to people living in rural areas that wouldn't have been before, to challenges around tourism, because the tourism is so important to our economy in the area, and then it knocks on to housing, where the supply of housing, everything we're all speaking about, I think, here, and everything that drives us all from being in our place is about people and making life better for people across our areas and where we represent. And from to put a rural slant on it, like I lived in the States for a number of years. I moved away as soon as I finished school from the area. I'm originally born and reared here. I moved to Dublin. I became an electrician, ran my own company, went to the States, came back to Dublin, and decided to come back to Clare because I remembered what a great place it was to grow up in. Mm-hmm. And that's what, we want from a rural perspective. I think we learned during COVID that people want to live and can live in rural areas, that it's not all about the big cities, that there are problems in the big cities. I think one of the Damien touched on it there about the derelict properties grant. Like in County Clare, we've given over 30 million approved for refurbishment of derelict properties, with over 500 properties refurbished already in County Clare. And I think that proves that people want to live in rural areas. And the challenge around that is making sure that the services and the economy and I suppose to get down to the most mundane of things, and Damien put the hair standing in the back of my neck there when he talked about having to review a roads program, because the conditions of our rural roads and roads around the country it's a real problem. After a bad winter and a number of climate change and water on the roads around our area are shocking. And I live 15 minutes from the most visited natural attraction in Ireland, the Cliffs of Moher, with 1.6 million people a year coming to it. The lads travel to New York. I'm sure they saw the Cliffs of Moher at airports and being used. And I live in a geopark, the Burren and the Cliffs of Moher UNESCO Global Geopark, an incredible place to live, with incredible people and incredible culture. And I think we need to remember them as places that people live, not just as tourist attractions. And we need to support them to make sure that they are sustainable and living environments. I think if you had asked me 10 years ago about rural and the future of rural life, I would probably have told you it was done. The trend internationally is attracting people into urban centres, and that provides the challenge. But I think what we've learned over the last number of years is that people can live in rural areas. They want to live there. There is a possibility, and that's what people want. And I think we have to respond to that. We're working on a unique housing scheme just while we're on housing. By the way, I think the Housing for All scheme is great, and it's fantastic, and we're making progress, playing catch up with our population increasing. But I think we need to look at private ownership and people being able to own their own homes and build their own homes. And I think that's something that's an ambition for an awful lot of Irish people, is to own their own homes. And the guys may have come across the Creeconia that Damien mentioned there, where the service site scheme, which is where the funding will be provided by government to put in wastewater, water, footpaths, lighting into something like quarter-acre sites in towns and villages. I've been driving this on for about 4 years, and we're launching it in the next week, where it's a pilot program in County Clare, where we're 12 sites in Listonvarna, and I think about 15 in Fecal. And I think it's a model that could work. And an enormous amount of the interest in it, ironically enough, is from people who want to downsize. Older people who live away, who are living out maybe potentially in remote areas and want to come in and live near the town and village. So I think that's an opportunity for people to own their own homes alongside the derelict grants. They've been really successful around the country. The challenge you have with them now is that the low-hanging fruit is probably gone. And like everything, when there's a grant for something, after a while people start adding on the price of the grant to sell the houses or to bring them back into use, which is, I think, a challenge, and I think it needs to be looked at, because with the crisis we're now in, with the cost of living and the war and knock-on effect of that, it's going to push up the cost of that building even more. And while we have huge interest in that service site scheme, people still have to be able to build their house. They still have to fund 300. Can we do something to make that affordable? And I think Paudie touched on it there. It's not directly related to this, but procurement regulations and the bureaucracy, I think that Damien touched on as well. I think that's driving a massive unnecessary cost onto the cost of doing business and the cost of everything. Geez, it's difficult enough with the costs that are real and there and are baked in. Recently, I'm involved in a community childcare centre. We had to go e-tenders to try. We've 100 kids and a waiting list of another 80 in a small rural town, and we were fortunate enough to get funding through our provisionally allocated funding through a building blocks program for $500,000 to add 40 spaces. We had to go e-tenders. I know we would have built that for at least a quarter less if we had been able to deal with local builders in County Clare and the fees that it costs to do that. And now we're going into a situation where the cost of building it is going to be probably a quarter again beyond the grant, and we won't be able to do it. I think the common sense that we're talking about here needs to start being applied, because we need that to help us to combat the challenges that are there. There's enough land zoned around Ireland to build plenty of houses. Is viability and affordability is the challenge. Look, our area is also, it's a rural area, a lot of farming. Farmers are very worried. They've gone through a lot of years of, being finger pointed at around being, responsible for all this, that, and the other. And I think we've taken farmers for granted. Mm-hmm. And I think we've taken rural life and rural people and rural culture for granted. And I think we need to go back to, to supporting that an awful lot more. If we're going to have, continue to have the extraordinary country that we have, that, as Michael said there at the very beginning, our strongest asset in Ireland is our people.
Yes.
Our strongest asset that goes across all corners of the globe. My son is in Jacksonville in Florida at the moment and in college. And American people are absolutely wonderful people. I love America and I love the American people. And I think we need to be very, very cognizant of what America has done for this country.
Yeah.
And likewise the UK. And I think there's an atmosphere out there at the moment that people need to catch themselves on a little bit. You know, circumstances in the world are driven by strange things, but we need to keep relationships internationally with the people that have been, I suppose, to the back of this country for a long, long time when things weren't so great. Look, those are, I suppose, touching on my most recent motion was looking for investment into rural towns and villages for housing, and because I think where we're in the past where farming and agriculture was the core, and there was 7 kids at least in every family living on the periphery of towns and villages, and I think towns and villages now have to become more of the heartbeat and more of the places that that people live and have sustainable futures. But look, I agree with all the other points that were made by colleagues, so I won't talk on. One of the main things I focus on as a councillor is bringing in money, and I think it was Damien or Michael that touched on the grant schemes that are out there are so important. A lot of them are community driven. Like in the last term, I was involved in bringing in over 20 million in town and village renewal, RRDF, Cllr. They're almost too complex as well. I think they could be streamlined a little bit more, but I think, and I would say this, and we would all say this, your local councillor is your most important politician.
Yeah.
Because he's there when officials move on and get promoted and TDs do this, that, and the other. But it's just touching on a few things.
Yeah.
You're definitely the county council's the forgotten powerhouse of the Irish political system, as we always say. And, talking about people want to live in the rural areas. My son, he's in the Defence Forces, and he bought a cottage, and he's living out there in the rural area, and he loves it. My daughter's a doctor, and she went to Melbourne, Australia. Thank God she came back. She's down now in the hospital in Cork, and but she said that she can't even afford, with the house prices in Cork, she cannot afford to get a mortgage or buy a house. She's still living with shared living accommodation, and on a doctor's wage. 20 years ago, she wouldn't have been able to afford to have a mortgage and buy a house. An awful lot of doctors, what I'm hearing from Australia, are not coming back to Ireland because of the cost of living crisis. They're even saying that they couldn't even afford to buy a bar of chocolate, and also they couldn't even, the exchange rate of the savings that they have in Australia, in the Australian dollars, they would lose money in coming back with their savings, and the housing crisis, the mortgage, where would they live if they come back? But yeah, I'm getting out of tonight is what you're all calling for is common sense coming back into action within local areas.
Yeah. And Joe, just
something you would have said, Roisin. I don't know if you heard the news or heard, I think it was Drive Time or something like that. They were talking about the government coming up with, a cost of living scheme and that sort of stuff. And I actually had it slightly higher, but their definition, whoever was on it, I think it was Alan Ahern, the Galway economist, the guy who advised the Taoiseach there. I think they were saying the baseline is somewhere between 120,000 and 150,000 euros is the poverty line in Ireland. That is a serious flag. If that's correct, and I actually would think that, because I know a lot of people whose combined income would be somewhere between 120 and 150, and they're broke.
Yeah.
Absolute broke. Now, I know people who are on social welfare and they're living their best life. So it works both ways. But when you talk about doctors and talk about, that sort of stuff, and people say, they could make so much money. 150,000 euros, not a lot of money when you've got two people and kids going into a house. And of course, if you're working, then you qualify for nothing. You absolutely qualify for nothing. And watch this space on Tuesday, because it'll be very interesting to see what is going to be revealed that's going to give people a break to keep working. Because we had a debate, and something that I think Joseph would have said something about the housing. We had a debate a while back, and because of the income limits are so low for social housing, and I actually said it in the meeting. I didn't say it in a flippant way, but it came out in the papers that you're better off on the dole. I'm better off telling people, listen, you're not going to get a house saving. You're not going to be able to pay extortionate rent and get a mortgage and get your deposit and then find somewhere, right? You're not going to get that. So your best bet is, if you want a house, go on the local authority housing list. But to do that, your income has to go down severely for the 52-week average. So it's interesting when you phrase that about, because they spent a couple of $100,000 on a campaign to get people to come home from Sydney and come home from Australia. But you know what? In that contract, it was in the paper yesterday. In that contract, in that program, there's no measurement of metrics. So they don't know how many people have come home because of that campaign or not. So, you know what I mean? And David's talking about regulation and red tape and all that sort of stuff. But the difficulty it is that, like, we're heading into a situation now where between 120 and 150,000 euro, which to me is big money, it's not enough. You're on the breadline.
Jesus.
And Joe, you made a very interesting point there about service sites that you're looking at in Clare. Do you have any kind of rough idea that by putting in the infrastructure that's there, like the water, the light, electricity, footpaths, etc., how much do you think that would shave off the cost of actually building the physical house? Have builders?
I think in honest reality, that would at least take 70 or 80,000 off the cost.
Yeah.
If you look at all the fees and the work involved in doing it, and particularly if you're building a one-off house, the amount of money that you would have to spend to possibly get planning permission, everything else. Now, the maximum deduction they can give to sell these sites is 30,000 off of what a valuer says is the cost of a service site in that area. So those sites will be for sale for between 40 and 45,000 in this location. There'll be quarter-acre sites with footpaths, the lights, everything, walk up the street in a small town. There's been a huge level of interest in it. We have to put it through Part 8, which is the council planning to get outline planning permission for the scheme. And I'm pushing the housing section to go another step and take some of the burden off of people by giving notional designs and notional house types. You'd have to do that anyway when you run into go for your own planning permission for your own house. But I think within that is an opportunity as well to use common sense and design them to be affordably built.
Yes.
That we as a local authority, with the expertise that we have in the housing section, should not be throwing somebody to an architect's whim, if you like, without giving them. I think we can help there a lot. In like a young couple that might come along and know nothing about building a house, they can potentially go and be brought into costs by people who mightn't necessarily have their full interest at heart. I'm not saying that the professions wouldn't, but I think that's something that we can do as a state and maybe as a local authority to take those costs off of people and to take the uncertainty around potentially making a wrong decision, and give our expertise to designing those houses for people, and design them in a way that maybe you can build a 2-bedroom house now, but that there's a very easy way that is designed to add a third and a 4th bedroom over years as your needs arise. But it's just, I suppose, and Paudie, another man that thinks outside the box. It's trying to think outside the box to make things doable and find ways of doing it. And maybe then you could cluster all those together and go to local builders and let the local authority take that role and try to get the best price possible from a local builder who mightn't have to drive 20 miles for 3 years to build a small scheme. We're all the time trying to find a way through what is a difficult chicane there with that. But I think that's one thing that can work.
Yeah, if I may, it certainly gives the young couples an option, and that's what they need. They need that option to where they can do their own thing. And you're quite right, Joe, what you're saying with regard to the actual build. It can be a log cabin. It could be a container home. it can be anything like that, whatever, that can be done very, very cheaply, but within certain guidelines, like so many bedrooms, so many square foot, etc., etc. And it certainly can be done, without doubt.
Can I just say on that, and I want to support exactly what the last two councillors have said. You know, the local authorities have the expertise. They have the architect's office. They have all of the mechanisms at their disposal to do this for social housing. I think if we're looking at our first time homeowners and service sites, I think we can provide that valuable expertise and actually put those houses through planning with a nice mix. And then when somebody comes and is looking at an option or an opportunity, the house or the site itself is shovel ready with all those fees already taken care of. And I think, you know, that valuable expertise, and I think Joe that said it, you know, you could leave it in a way that there could be an addition to any of those houses going forward. And, you know, the type of house that you would go for or the size or footprint of it would be representative of your means with an opportunity to have an addition. So, you know, the local authority often gets criticised for, you know, being deeply involved with the department in the social housing programme. But I think there's a lot we can do for the working class and the people that's trying to put a roof over their own head. And at the same time, subsume that into the soft supports that's within the local authority system. And, you know, a little bit of creative thinking and schemes like that. And next thing, you start to turn the thing around and something that was unachievable can become somewhat manageable.
Yes.
Well, one of the things we were pushing for, and we're still pushing for in Wexford, is that the entire, one of the difficulties, and I'm sure you guys have the same thing, one of the things we're pushing to do is to get everybody under one roof in a hotel and to do information nights where you have all of the services under the one roof in the one room. So if it's, you know, the open door, if it's shared equity, if it's, you know, the housing assistance payments, social housing, affordable housing, all of those. The difficulty is they're all different sections of the county council. Within the housing section, they're doing it. And what we're looking for is to try and get everybody for a couple of hours on a one night in the month, get everyone together. So that way, no matter what stage in the housing process you are at, whether you're looking to find out whether you qualify or this, that, and the other thing, you go into the one room and there's people there who are going to be the decision makers to do it. Because what I'm finding is very similar to yourself. You have to chase each and every program individually, and then it just becomes, you know, bureaucracy after more officialdom. Where I think if you had a one-stop shop where a couple goes in there to find out what their rights, what their options are, and then they can decide from there, I think it'd be far much quicker.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Michael. And why couldn't we bring finance into the room as well?
Oh, without doubt, you know, because we do the affordable, you know, like, the mortgages and that. Yeah.
If you can. And like that's the state really helping. Like when we started this, and I know we're talking about the surface site scheme, but I don't know if you've ever heard of a man called Father Harry Bowen. Manager of the Clare Hurlers in a long time ago, but a great man. But he had a rural housing scheme going, and he built over 3,000 houses in Clare. That kept communities going and vibrant and gave homes to people. So I just think we need to move in that direction of not just becoming the bureaucracy that we're all talking about. It's a challenge to deal with, but that we're the solution. And in fairness, we all work with great people in officials, in the council, and with great expertise. And I think that, from my experience working with the lads in housing, and they're really getting into this because they can see, geez, this is something we can deliver. You know, local authority officials and council officials are the finest of people in the country. I won't hear a word said against them, even though I'm fighting with them every day. But
well, we're supposed to fight with them. Yeah,
it's the system that constrains them. But look, that's just one thing, and I think it's housing. But I agree again. I don't know who said it. The threshold for social and affordable housing needs to go up. Absolutely,
because that's ridiculous. Will help,
that will help build communities as well better. And it'll help, you know, to encourage people to say, well, you know what, I can work and I still will get this opportunity. You know, that decision isn't put before people. They will say, well, I have to be at a certain threshold, so I'm not going to work. That's soul destroying for people. Nobody wants to do that instinctively. I think that needs to raise, while it would increase the social and housing list, I think it it would expand, because we are building a lot, and hopefully we'll keep building them. But I think it's how we build communities as well as houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, building
Yeah.
community.
And I suppose the other there, Joe, again, is like social housing. Social housing is great, but it's not the be all and end all of our housing situation either, you know.
Absolutely.
Just to
And
touch
what,
there, something I wanted to say there about the rail network and stuff as well. Something that I pushed in by motion for the Geal station to be reopened is that Geal has a huge grounds, huge space down there, and I've been trying to push this concept also, and I think the government should really come on board with it, and that's a park and rail concept. Whereas, like, you have a lot of small stations, very limited parking. And we really need to start looking at putting in multi-story parking next or even over the rail line at these stations to create a concept of a park and rail where people can actually drive. People, like, as you know, in the country area, people could be 4 or 5 miles away from the train station, and they're not going to walk. They can't get a bus.
no.
Yeah.
So they have to drive, but there's no parking. So the park and rail concept is something we really need to be bringing in as well with regard to our rail networks.
And also with, because I often get the train to Dublin. I see that Paul would collect me before he goes to work and take me to the train station, or my son would, or I get a taxi, because there isn't enough parking spaces in the train station. And on top of that, there needs to be more carriages put on, because if you don't book a seat and book it a week in advance, you don't get a seat, and there's no room on the train. And then I remember we were at the Lewis one day, and the trains were all off, and I was at the Lewis, and I said they should put more carriages off. But someone did make a common sense answer to me, and could this be why they're not putting more carriages on? He said, but the platforms are not long enough for more trains,
No,
for carriages on the trains.
that may well be the case, but if you went on a train in England, or even in the underground in England, the trains, they're quite long, and some stations are small, but they tell you it comes on the intercom, move to the forward carriages to get off at the next station, move forward. You have to go up to the next carriages to get off, and they'll tell you that.
Good
It
answer.
can be done. It can be done.
Can be done.
Yeah.
Like an extra two carriages on every train or Lewis, would make a huge difference. Like,
yes.
Because I even drove up to the Lewis one day, and because I couldn't get on the train, and there wasn't even enough parking spaces in the Lewis. So I was driving around for nearly an hour and a half waiting for a parking space at the red car in the Lewis. So it's like, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
Parking is still a massive issue across the country. We still need our cars.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, my wife has an electric car now, and I have a diesel Skoda Karoq, and I'm going to be stealing her car now for the next couple of days. We did put in the solar panels last year, and like, it is ironic. One of the, I suppose, regrets you would have is the years of austerity. I think we didn't spend money enough on future proofing quickly enough, and I suppose as an Irish thing, you're always waiting for the rainy day is going to come, that it's going to run out, and it seems like it potentially could be running out now. But are we resilient enough in the face of it? We still have to invest in the future and not go cutting. As Damien said there earlier on, if we have to, we can't get through crisis after crisis, and I think COVID showed it by what we did in the recession and the crash, and the damage that did. And it was, international and driven by international direction and the IMF and all of that. But I think our country is still recovering from that. And we're playing catch up. And we've made huge investments since 2018-19 when they opened the purse strings. But then the population is going up, which is a good thing, something we always wanted. But look, you're always running hard, and I think this country has a great future. And you feel anxious to invest in it. You won't do it by cutting anyway,
No.
or without common sense. And I think
Yeah.
that piece that's been missing in the whole lot of it is common sense.
I think we need to bring common sense politics. Maybe that instead of politics, it should be common sense politics, and bring in the county councillors to all the decision making in the on the tables. And county councillors, I think it was, if we had you in the rooms doing all the planning and organising, doing away with the red tape. Things will be done. They will progress. You know the local engineers. You know the local areas. You know the local builders. You know the local everybody who's local. You know the local farmers who know the land in the rural areas, and you know everybody who needs to be contacted in times of need. Never mind in times of building houses and where to build houses and the roads. And common sense needs to come back.
Can I just say one thing there? And it's to follow on from what Joe said. The cuts have a detrimental effect. And I think, within the civil service, if things are beginning to tighten, well, there's an automatic kind of move towards cuts. I think it needs to be a more practical and more pragmatic approach. You should grow yourself out of recession rather than reduce and shrink your base. And not at all for one moment advocating against reckless management of our finances, but prudent management with an ability to grow yourself out of it is the way forward. And you mentioned local authority members. I think the one thing that comes home to me is that in the midst of the pandemic, the councillors on the ground, and I say this without fear or favour, they became the go-to people in every constituency right up and down the country, because the national representatives clinics ceased to exist because of the fact that they weren't allowed to operate, and it was the county councillors that were the first point of contact, and the local representatives were the ones that worked with their communities to help them and assist them get out of that. And I think that the workload on local representatives prior to that, but it's certainly through that and post that, has quadrupled in relation to the representations that we get. We get representations that just don't affect or aren't just relevant to our work within the local authority. They're relevant to people's every walk of life. And, sometimes we can send that on to national and ministers and whatever, but we are the first point of contact.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we've reached to the hour, and gentlemen, it's a Friday night, and we know that you have lives to live, families to be with, and we want to thank you for taking the time out of your Friday night to join the County Councillors Caucus panel discussion, and remind everybody that the County Councillors are the forgotten powerhouse of the political system. And you know what? We want to actually bring that back to the forefront and bring back common sense to politics with the national politicians and the civil service realizing that you have to be consulted.
Absolutely, Roisin, agree with everything.
I'm paid more.
Episode 20.
I'm paid more.
And you all need an office, you all need a PA, and you all need to be paid more.
Yes, we do.
God bless everyone.
God bless.
Take care. Have a nice
Take care,
weekend.
everyone. Thanks a
Have a
million.
good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.